The consequences of an act affect the probability of it occurring again. B.F. Skinner. Hey, MSA family, I'm Jimmy O'Brien.
And I'm Marissa Eck.
And welcome to the Behavior Beacon number 8, punishment, but not what you think. This one is going to be a little bit more controversial, but we feel it's necessary to talk about this basic principle. So again, welcome to the newsletter on punishment. We know what you're thinking. The word punishment has a very, very controversial term, no matter which way you look at it. So in this newsletter, we will address people's perceptions and definitions of punishment. And we're going to contrast that with what punishment means in behavior analysis. Our hope is to describe punishment in a way that is more consumable, approachable, and less stigmatizing. Because as you will see, just like reinforcement, punishment is happening to us on a daily basis, whether we know it or not. Moreover, it has a huge impact upon all our behaviors. So let's dive in. One of the main problems in behavior analysis has been the adoption of using already established words and attaching new meaning to them. In other words, when Skinner was uncovering or putting labels to these very natural phenomenon, he took words that already had meaning. And if you think about some of the topics that we've had, I'm working off script here a little bit, Marissa. So when he describes some of the words here, some of the stuff that we've been over is reinforcement, extinction, consequences, stimulus, control. Of all those words, if you really think about it, the one that really makes the most sense and applies well with what people's perception of their definition and the actual principle in behavior analysis is reinforcement. But all those other ones seem to have two dual meanings, and it's very difficult for people to kind of go back and forth. I know for myself, and I'm sure Marissa could attest to this, when we were learning some of these basic principles, it was very difficult for us to take a word that already had meaning and then learn it in a different way. So, for example, the word consequence. We've talked about consequence. Consequence means anything that happens after a behavior, and certainly does not just mean something negative. The word behavior. The behavior means anything that you say or do, and not necessarily something bad. Extinction. Extinction does not mean we're killing off people. It just basically means it's a consequence, it's part and parcel with reinforcement, in which the reinforcement or the payoff doesn't happen. And as a result, it decreases the future probability of those behaviors. So that's going to be the same kind of mentality that we're going to be looking at with the word punishment. In the vernacular, it means one thing. It comes to elicit very strong emotional responding. But the thing is, in behavior analysis, it means something different. Why they did that, I don't know. I just can tell you it is a huge public relations nightmare. And because of that, people are very reluctant to even talk about it. We think it is a natural phenomenon, which we're going to talk about. It happens every day, and it's important for you guys to know it. So if you hear us say the word punishment, although it means one thing, we're saying it in a different way.
So what we all know punishment to be, this is going to sound familiar to you guys, I'm sure. So punishment as we know it has been defined as in the dictionary and in many different ways where we talk about it in our normal life as a penalty or a fault or offense or violation. Also to inflict a penalty for commission of an offense in retribution or retaliation to deal with roughly or harshly suffering pain or loss that serves as retribution. Think of it as a penalty in that way. And it's usually when you think of punishment, you think of the law or you think of the judicial structure. So some think of it as payback, revenge, getting what you deserve. If you just do a Google image search right now for how it's portrayed, it's not pretty, and it can elicit some very strong emotional feelings, and rightly so. But in our field, in behavior analysis, it means something completely different altogether. So punishment as defined behaviorally. It is the same word, but it has a much different meaning. Like we discussed above, a major issue in behavior analysis has been the adoption of words that already have a meaning and then using them to explain a behavioral phenomena differently. These conceptual revisions, as we call them, are so challenging and problematic and a public relations nightmare, as Jimmy alluded to earlier. It is virtually impossible to change the meaning of a word that has already been well established in our vernacular. It's unlearning something that feels very permanently learned. In behavioral analysis, punishment is technically defined as a basic principle of learning, describing response, consequence, functional relation, in which a response is followed by a stimulus change that in turn decreases the future occurrence of that type of behavior. Those are a lot of words strung together to describe a very simple phenomenon. In other words, punishment is...
It's punishing to hear that.
It's a lot of words. I would imagine a lot of you have checked out by now being like, there's just too much happening, but hopefully you're still with us. In other words, punishment is something that happens after a behavior occurs and then decreases the probability that under similar circumstances, it is less likely to occur again in the future. More specifically, it usually involves engaging in a behavior and then either getting something you don't like or something that you don't want, or getting something that you do like or that you do want taken away. Both actions decreasing the likelihood of you doing it again. And I'm gonna pass over the yin-yang conversation to Jimmy.
So before we move on, let's unpackage that a little bit. Let that settle. So what we're saying here is punishment is a natural phenomenon that happens to us on a daily basis. So punishment is really not defined in a sense by the definition, but its effect upon behavior, whether it's good or bad. So remember our discussion about consequences, or those events that happen after behavior, which provide us feedback and determine if we do things more or less in the future? Well, when you really think about it, right, there are really two general consequences, both the polar opposites of each other, but yet working together in unison. It's kind of a beautiful thing. So remember, reinforcement is when you get things that you like or things that you don't like are taken away, and as a result will increase the future probability of behavior. I might engage in a behavior, someone says something very nice to me, and as a result of, and I like that, and as a result of that, I would be much more likely to do that behavior again under similar circumstances. On the opposite extreme, I might engage in a behavior that I'm able to remove or avoid some unpleasant circumstance. For example, if I'm in a very cold room and Marissa is also there, and I ask Marissa, hey, can you please close that window? And now Marissa closes the window. Well, what happened there? I was in an aversive situation, and engaging in this particular behavior, Marissa was able to remove something that I did not want. I wanted the removal of the cold. And as a result, I will be much more likely to do that again in the future. So now think about that. Now the opposite, right? We get things sometimes that we don't like, or we get things that we like taken away. As a result, that will decrease the future probability of our behavior. In other words, we consider that punishment. I might stub my toe. I can get verbal reprimands. We get ticketed. Our lives are always back and forth with this yin and yang. As I'm moving through time and space, there will be some behaviors that will get reinforced, good things will happen. There are things that will happen just naturally that there's some type of punishment. I'll get something that I don't like, or something I like gets taken away. And as a result of that, my trajectory of my behavior will be much different. Cooper, Heron, and Hewer, they describe it as the evil twin brother of reinforcement. But if you can look beyond that definition and its nasty meanings, there's a lot of value to this natural consequence that has the ability to decrease the future probability of our behaviors. So one, like reinforcement, punishment happens whether it's planned or not. Think about your day and all the times where you're moving through time and space, and you might get something that you don't like, or something that you like gets taken away. And as a result, you would think twice about doing that behavior again. Two, it happens every day and all the time. Like I said before, we bump into things, we avoid social disapproval, we follow laws, etc. Why do you pay taxes? I certainly don't pay taxes because my tax guy says, way to go, Jimmy. I pay to avoid the social consequences. And third, it has helped us with for our survival in so many ways. So could you imagine what would happen if we were not sensitive to those types of consequences? Think about it, right? If we were not sensitive, I might say, hey, look at that big growling bear over there. Let me go pet that. Or if I see something hanging from a tree and it's poisonous, me trying it. Or saying, hey, that flame looks really pretty. Let me touch that. All of these things, if that we were not sensitive to it, we would not be around this long. Think about, in today's world, not wearing masks,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Marissa?
No, that was great. I was going to say, I think that this concept right now is especially important because the social disapproval of, especially in New York City, of not wearing a mask is a form of punishment because you're that social disapproval for those who care, you have to have value in what other people think and how, you're treated. Mm-hmm. So that's a really important thing to imagine going into a Trader Joe's and not having a mask on and having everybody snarling at you. It's extremely uncomfortable and you're less likely to do it again in the future. So
and also with the caveat that if you're sensitive to that form of aversion, there's some people who just don't care, which is, I think, a lot of reasons why this world the way it is, if more people are as sensitive to reinforcement and punishment, natural consequences, I think this world will be a better place. And as you will see, as Skinner has once said, we want to move more towards positive reinforcement. So there are a whole bunch of different examples of punishment, that is, things that happen after behavior which decrease the future probability in behavior analysis. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, but Marissa is going to go through some of the more common everyday ones that you guys are familiar with. We're just going to give it a name, and that you're probably doing on a daily basis. And again, the purpose here is it's okay. These are natural phenomenon. We're trying to dissect the ickiness of the word with the actual behavioral definition. And again, it's one of the more difficult concepts. Why some of the language has persisted, I don't know. Even Skinner in 1958, when he wrote this book called Verbal Behavior, he always said, look for your effect upon the listener and not the speaker. So I still don't know why today we're still using that word. And it should be called something else that is less stigmatizing and meets the true nature of, nature's laws.
Yep. So here are some, forms of punishment that, like Jimmy said, these are naturally occurring and likely things that you never considered as punishment because this is your first time kind of learning about it in the behavioral analytic perspective. So reprimands are probably the most common form of getting something we don't want that decrease our behavior. Some common examples include being told no, being told to stop, being told don't do that, knock it off. We have a plethora of options there. We have all been through that. Even our parents' tones or facial expressions can convey a message to cease whatever we're doing, or we'll be getting something we don't want or something we want taken away. Everyone knows that everyone's got a mom face, everyone's got a dad face, everyone's got a teacher face. It works because in the presence of that facial expression or tone, the behavior is then less likely to occur again. At least that's the point.
Right.
So does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I grew up in an Irish Catholic family. I also went to Catholic school as a youngster. And if I ever heard James Gerard O'Brien, things were just not good.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect example of that.
That was a signal for you're going to get something you don't like, or something you like is going to get taken away. So as a result, change your repertoire of behaviors.
Absolutely. And similarly, and also in the sense of when you're called to the principal's office, hearing your name called over the intercom, that definitely signals I was in trouble when I was in elementary school. So it's all kind of relative.
Yeah. And for me, that functioned as a punisher. For some individuals, it might not. So one of the points that we're trying to make here is that punishment is really not defined by what it looks like. It's more defined by its effect upon behavior. So
Right.
if you're providing, you know, and we say this to some of our parents, if you're providing social reprimands and the behavior is still occurring, well, then guess what? That's not in the sense punishment that's decreasing the future probability. It's increasing the behavior, which is really considered reinforcement. So I know it's
Yep.
sometimes it can blow your mind, but you know, again, the point is look at the effect upon the future probability of behavior to determine whether something is reinforcement or punishment. It is a tough pill to swallow.
Absolutely. Here's another version that is used probably in your home or not, but it's something that is definitely more commonly used. Timeout is probably the most popularized form of getting something that you like taken away. And that is a form of punishment. So timeout is for short for timeout from positive reinforcement. So it's, sorry for my flub. Timeout is really short for timeout from something fun or something positive, like form of positive reinforcement. So in timeout, a person loses an opportunity to engage in positively reinforcing activities or playing with positively reinforcing items when they have engaged in a behavior that is deemed not appropriate, with the intent that that will decrease the likelihood of it happening again in the future. So for an example, we get sent to our room, we stay inside during recess, we get grounded, like Snoopy here, he's in the penalty box, maybe he didn't do something right during the hockey game, we lose access to tech, etc. These are versions of different types of timeout and why they're used. And the last one that we wanted to highlight is something called response cost. So this might be something you've heard us talk about at MSA, but it's definitely an effective procedure. So is another way of getting something you like taken away with the effect of decreasing your behavior. So within a response cost, you lose a certain amount of a reinforcer or reinforcement for engaging in some type of behavior. We get fines, we get tickets, we lose TV time, we lose video game time, we have our bedtimes pushed up earlier, we don't get dessert, whatever it is. There are other versions of punishment in behavior analysis that are beyond the scope of this newsletter. It's super important to think about. We are just reviewing the common ones that you're going to see in everyday life, but there are other versions. We may touch upon them, we may not. We wanted to highlight the more common everyday ones that occur on a daily basis, whether we knew it before or not. So now I'm going to pass it along to Jimmy to talk about what do you do with this information.
So now what? So now we've been through this kind of controversial topic. We're saying it's really not that controversial. We went through what the technical definition versus the everyday definition. And we wanted to do that so that you know that punishment from the behavioral perspective is a phenomenon that happens every day and will continue to do so. So the purpose of this newsletter was not to be suggestive, but to be really informative for you. We certainly do not recommend using punishment in the same sense as everyone knows it as a sole intervention. Listen, it's going to happen, and punishment has its effect, and it's very effective. The problem with punishment as being effective is that it's so effective that people have a tendency to overuse it. And we're saying certainly that should not be your sole intervention. Life has natural consequences in life, and we should use those to our benefit. So we wanted you to be aware of a very real principle and be informed on when it's appropriate or you can be used effectively, but as part of a much more comprehensive, positive, preventive, reactive, and adaptive plan. So if you're going to use it wisely, use it sparingly, and use it when it really means, you know, for some really difficult behavior. In addition to all the other good, positive, and preventive strategies. So our tip of the week is not we're not going to rifle off a whole bunch of tips. This is just basically more to be more informative. So our tip is we hope that the newsletter was both informative and enlightening. I hope now you kind of stop and think about the word versus the actual phenomenon and see like, wow, they're two very diametrically opposed concepts. So instead of using the word punishment, say something different. We say it has a decreasing effect. We say it has a suppressive effect. So we started the newsletter with a quote from Skinner about consequences. And we hope and strongly suggest to move towards a more positive reinforcement because we feel the same way as B.F. Skinner does, who once said, and I love this, What is love except another name for the use of positive reinforcement or vice versa? So with that, we hope your life is filled with much more positive reinforcement than punishment, although it will occur, and it's going to occur
Yes.
today. Whether you know it or not, whether you choose to believe it or not, or even accept it, it will occur. But move toward more positive reinforcement, because that's just another word for love.
Yep.
So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you're kind of like, and I hope you reach out to us, and if you want to have more of a deeper discussion of this. So with that, I am Jimmy O'Brien,
I am Marissa Eck.
and thanks for this newsletter. We will see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.